Next is entities. Next is entities, right? And this is a quote. She says, "The only primary existence. Entities are the only," right? And that's an absolute claim, right? The entities are the only primary existence, and that's a quote from Rand. And the question means, well, what does it mean to say that entities, the given, are the only primary existence? Until this point, she doesn't make a differentiation between primary and what you might think is secondary or tertiary existences. She doesn't do that. We'll see as we progress from chapter 1 to chapter 8, if she returns to this idea of primary, secondary, tertiary existences. If she doesn't, then it's problematic, right? Because she has introduced this idea of primary existences. So by saying that it is the only primary existence, the question is, and I don't know the answer to this. I mean, I do know the answer to this, but I'm not going to give the answer to this yet. Up until this point, based on what we've read so far, if you don't have a fuller understanding of sort of the philosophical background, the history of philosophy, it would be impossible to make any sense of what she means by primary existence. But in a Lockean sense, right, you can look at primary existence, you can make the assumption that by primary existence she means the form, or to use her term, the attribute that an object has. So the shape of an object might be its primary existence. That shape is a given in the world. In Lockean terms, Locke would say that, and I think at this point it would be fair to assume that Rand would say that secondary existences, though she doesn't use the term at all up until this point, secondary existences would be the colors and such that are attributed, the taste, the level of heat, and so on. All of these things which are in a sense subjective. And I've given you examples, right? So that the example that I gave in a previous lecture was, we have an object, the object is said to be red. There are two perceivers. One perceiver perceives the object as red, the other perceives the object as not red. One and the same object can't both be red and not red. It's a contradiction. What we recognize is that the redness of the object is a construct of my mind and not a construct of the thing itself. The primary, the only primary existence, the primary existence is the form, is the form of the object, right? The attribute. She would say that it's the attribute, right? So that our primary existence is equal to the attribute, A-T-T-R-I-B-U-T-E. The primary existence is equal to the attribute, and arguably the secondary existence is a condition of our cognition, of our concept formation, right? So that one and the same object can't both be red and not red. The primary existence is the attribute that the existing thing has. So in this, the volume, the shape, the fact that it is a cube is a constituent part of the object. Nobody would look at this object and perceive this object as being spherical, right? You can't. You might perceive the colors as being different from the colors that they are, right? That color, being a secondary quality of its existence, is contingent and a consequence of the construct of the individual perceiver's mind. So secondary existence is a consequence of perception, the mind of the perceiver. Primary existence is the attribute itself, right? She doesn't spell this out in those terms, but the only thing that we can do to make sense of what she said up until this point is to assume, right? Maybe I could be wrong in my assumption, but I think I'm right. Is to assume that by primary existence she's making sort of a Lockean referral to primary and secondary qualities, right? Something in that regard. Okay, and that might be a huge assumption, but that's the assumption that I'm making. All right, next, attributes. Do you want space? Yeah. Okay, so we have concepts, we have entities, and now we have attributes. Alright, attributes. Attributes always exist in relation with entities, never by themselves. Attributes always exist in relation with entities, never by themselves. What does that mean? Well, let's return, I erased it. Let's return to this idea of length, right? So the attribute would be length in this example. So we have, we'll say that these are the entities. I'll make it. Okay, we'll say that these are the entities, and this is the attribute, right? Her claim is that in discussion of attributes, attributes exist categorically in relation, and you could even say always. Attributes always exist in relationship with entities and never just the attribute by itself, right? It's always in relation, so that when we talk about the attribute of shape, the attribute of volume, the attribute of sort of occupying space, spatial dimensions, we recognize that that idea exists in conjunction necessarily with this object, this particular thing, right? The only way that we arrive at an abstracted notion of length independent to the thing that contains or possesses length, or projects to be, like, well, project might be too much, but possesses length, is to extrapolate, right? Is to extrapolate length from the object itself. It is an attempt to identify an attribute in a thing, and I mean identify in the technical sense, right? We see an entity, we identify a particular ball, the red ball. Insofar as I've made an identification of the specific red ball, I now recognize its spherical nature, right? I isolate that out from all of the given, all of the surrounding noise. And insofar as I isolate that from the surrounding noise, I can now conceptualize what this thing is. In my conceptualization of the ball, I can remove conceptually, not literally, conceptually, and this really is the point. Conceptually, my mind has a power that is impossible to replicate in the world, right? And this is really the point. My mind is so powerful that I can remove the object from its attribute, something which is impossible. It is literally impossible in the metaphysical world, but it's completely easy in my mind. So now I'm just thinking about length, right? I'm just thinking about length, and I recognize that I can have a discourse on length independent to talking about any particular length, right? I can have a discourse on apples without talking about any particular apple. I can have a discourse, and you get it, and so on and so on and so forth. So that my mind is so powerful that my mind has the ability to remove the attribute from the object, from the perceptual entity, from the specifically identified perceptual entity, and only conceptualize the attribute in itself, something which is impossible in the world. The attribute becomes what she classifies as the distinguishing characteristic, And obviously, I mean, it should be easy to recognize now that the distinguishing characteristic for these three perceptual things, these identifiable things, is the fact that they contain length.